Hey guys, Marshall Sutcliffe here, and we're doing another draft on DailyMTG for the drafting with limited information, and it's M15 time. So let's dive into this and see what we get for our first pack. We've got a rare of Llanowar Wastes, which is okay, but not really deserving of a first pick in most scenarios. Looking at the rest of the pack, I see a few cards that I like, but nothing really great. This pack's pretty mediocre. There's an Inferno Fist and a Generator Servant in red. I like red the most so far in M15, and I think I'm going to take one of these cards. I think I'm going to go for the Inferno Fist because it acts as removal and also it can get in for extra damage. Okay, out of our next pick, we get past one of the coolest rares in the set, Hornet Nest. Gosh, I love that card. We got some decent red cards here too with Goblin Rough Rider. I don't really like Foundry Street Denizen that much, but the Paragon could be good, and the Bloodseeker is definitely okay. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, it gets bigger and gets first strike. It also gets haste, but that's rarely relevant. The first strike's the most important thing because you can attack with it and then kill an opponent's other creature after they've already blocked, and then it gets bigger and gets first strike, and you can kill that creature too. So it's very tough to interact with. That said, I'm going to take a Hornet Nest because this card is cool. Okay, this next pick is a tough one. It's hard to say what the best card out of this pack is. There's nothing really amazing. Sanctified Charge is really good in the right deck. Meteorite can give you splashes and sometimes kill creatures, and it's colorless, so you can play it in a lot of different decks. I really like Reclamation Sage because worst case scenario, it's a 2-1 for 3, which isn't quite good enough to play, but when you factor in the upside, it actually becomes quite strong. I'm going to take Reclamation Sage out of this pack because I think that there's going to be enough artifacts and enchantments to kill that I want it. Okay, this next pack is pretty unexciting. There's some decent cards in it. There's another Meteorite, which we could take. There's also an Encrust and Appeal from Reality, two pretty good blue cards, and a couple of decent white cards with Selfless Cathar and Heliod's Pilgrim, but nothing really exciting. I think I'm just going to take the Meteorite and evaluate our options as we move forward. This next pack isn't too exciting either. There's a Wall of Mulch and a Titanic Growth in green, and there's a Goblin Rough Rider for red. I think Accursed Spirit's probably the best card here. Divination's pretty good too, but we're just going to take the Rough Rider and stay on our colors until something pushes us in a different direction. This pack's not that great either. I'm going to take the Titanic Growth because I think it's a lot better than Vine Weft. But I do like some of these other cards floating around. We'll keep an eye on them. All right, not a whole lot for us here. There is a Verdant Haven though. We can take that and maybe get a splash going. Maybe we just splash Inferno Fist or something and end up being in a different color. Let's take Verdant Haven and see what happens. Okay, so black seems to be pretty open here with the Witch's Familiar, a Carrion Crow, and a Zathrid Slyblade all still in the pack. We could take a Hammerhand or a Rummaging Goblin, but I think I want to actually move over into black a little bit here and see if we can make it work. So I think it's between these two. There's 3 different 3-drops, but these two are the best ones, I think, and I'm going to try out Zathrid Slyblade because it's cool. This pack has a Charging Rhino, a Plummet, and a Ranger's Guile still in it. I'm just going to take the Charging Rhino and just see if it fits in the deck. Interesting. This pack has the Altac Bloodseeker that we opened, and not much else except for a Typhoid Rats. I'm going to take the Bloodseeker. Red might be open after all. Okay, this one has a Necrobite and a couple of decent blue cards. We're just going to take the Necrobite. Not much here. A Carnivorous Moss Beast, which I'm going to move to the sideboard. Again, not much here. Just an Ornithopter. We're never going to play that. Last pick, Staff of the Mind Magus. Man, that seems about right. So this first pack seemed to go pretty well for us. We should be in green, but we might be in red. We might be in black, or maybe even something else. We'll have to see what this next pack gives us. Okay, so this next pack doesn't give us a lot. There's some decent things here, though. Paragon of Fierce Defiance can be pretty good in this red deck, though we've only really got 2 red creatures so far, so I don't think I want to take it. Our rare is Polymorphous Jest, which is kind of an interesting rare. It's like Turn to Frog, but for all their creatures instead of just one. I think from this pack, though, I'm going to take Living Totem and see if we can't maybe get it out a turn early thanks to Convoke. This next pack is really interesting. It's got a Stab Wound and an Inferno Fist on it, so we can kind of figure out which way we want to go. There's also a Flesh to Dust, but we probably won't get that back. I think the standard pick would be to take the Inferno Fist and stay on color, but also if we take Stab Wound, we can probably just cast it from Verdant Haven and Meteorite and not feel too bad about it either. I think we can make a good case for taking either of the cards, but I feel like black's a little more open, so I'm going to take Stab Wound. Wow, this pack is great for us. Really incredible. There's a Kurd Chieftain, a Caustic Tar, and a Burning Anger, and these are all fantastic cards. Even Blastfire Bolt is quite good. I'm going to take Burning Anger, I think. If you read this card, it just turns any creature you have into tap kill stuff. Kurd Chieftain, though, is really tempting. We might get lucky and get it back because the player has to be able to pay green and already be in red, which we are, but somebody will probably take it just because it's so good. Okay, so this pack has a Shaman of Spring. Our rare is Sliver Hive, but unfortunately, in order to start making slivers, we need to already control a sliver, and we don't have any. So I think I'm going to take Shaman of Spring to just get card advantage. This pack has a card that I like a lot in this format, Forge Devil, and we're going to take that to try to kill some of our opponent's cheap creatures. Here I like Generator Servant quite a bit. It helps us power out our more expensive cards early, and it also just does a good job of attacking. This pick is interesting. There's a Frostlings here which is quite strong, but we can't actually play it. And I don't think that we want a Frenzied Goblin. I'm going to take Sunblade Elf, and if we run the Meteorite and the Verdant Haven, we can run it and sometimes activate it. If not, then it'll just make it into the sideboard. Here's another Reclamation Sage that we can run. I'll take the Lava Axe here. Wow, so red looks very open. We wield the Inferno Fist that we got earlier. And I'm very excited about that because that was a close pick with the Stab Wound, and now we get Inferno Fist and Stab Wound. Caustic Tar is somehow still here, but I don't think we can take it. We're going to be splashing black and probably just for Stab Wound. So I don't think we can take Caustic Tar, but we can take Naturalize or Satyr Wayfinder, no problem. And I think we'd rather have a Satyr Wayfinder since we already have 2 Reclamation Sages. This pack doesn't really have anything for us. We're not going to play Vine Weft or any of these other cards. I'll take the Vine Weft just in case. Miner's Bane, maybe. And we'll take 1 Clear a Path for the sideboard. So this pack was pretty good for us. We solidified ourselves in red-green. Unfortunately, we didn't get the Kurd Chieftain back, but we did get a Burning Anger. So hopefully that pulls its weight. Okay, this pack has an Indulgent Tormentor in it, which is an incredible card. But I think that we're far enough away from black now that we can't cast it or take it. I'm going to take a Netcaster Spider because I like how good it is on defense and it attacks pretty well on offense too. This pack isn't too exciting for us. We could splash an Ulcerate. We could take a Broodkeeper. I think we should probably take the Broodkeeper and hope to find Inferno Fist on it. If not, it's not the worst card ever. Actually, and Burning Anger is an aura as well. And if we really needed to, we could even Stab Wound it. So yeah, let's take Broodkeeper. I like taking a Borderland Marauder here. It's a good 2-drop that gets to start attacking pretty early. This pick is interesting because we can take Hammerhand if we want and try to put it on Broodkeeper, but I don't love it otherwise, so I'm going to take another Borderland Marauder. Nice! We got a Lightning Strike. We really need some removal, and a Lightning Strike this late in the pack is very good. Okay, this is an interesting pick because there's a Paragon of Eternal Wilds, which we can take because we've got a lot of green cards, but I think I just want another Broodkeeper and try to make a Broodkeeper deck. Okay, we got another Lightning Strike. I like that better than Forge Devil or Elvish Mystic by quite a bit. Not much for us here. I don't think we want another Verdant Haven. In fact, I'm thinking that maybe we just take out this splash altogether. Don't want a Lava Axe either, and make our deck a little bit more streamlined. So I'm just going to take the rare for my collection. Okay, another generator servant, I'll take it. And I like Krenko's Enforcer here a lot too. I'll take a Mind Rot. Okay, so this deck came out pretty good, I think. We do need to make a couple more cuts to it, and we do have a couple of interesting decisions in the sideboard too. One card that we could definitely look at is Vine Weft. It's an aura that enchants a creature. The creature just gets +1/+1. It's not really a big deal, but if it dies or if the Vine Weft gets in the yard somehow, you get to bring it back to your hand for 5 mana. This is a very mana inefficient spell. This isn't the type of thing that you would normally want in your deck, but maybe we could run it because we have 2 Broodkeepers, and all we have to do is get this on a Broodkeeper. You can see Broodkeeper here. Once it becomes attached, we get a 2/2 red dragon with flying, and it's got fire breathing too. It's a big deal. You only really have to do this once to get a full card of value out of it. That being said, we've got 2 Inferno Fists and a Burning Anger, and we can probably do a pretty good job on our own, but Vine Weft is a card that we should definitely consider here. I don't love Miner's Bane, but I do feel like we want something to do with the big mana that we can get from our generator servants, and also it's a really good target for Burning Anger. I think we can cut 1 Reclamation Sage pretty easily, as they're not always great, and I think we can get rid of 1 Satyr Wayfinder, or the Satyr Wayfinder as well, as it's just not particularly aggressive, and the rest of our cards are actually quite aggressive when you really look at them. The question that I have is, should we make room for Vine Weft? We can, and we would cut something like Living Totem, or maybe another Reclamation Sage, and we can bring it in out of the sideboard. I think I'm going to try that. I really want to try to make this Broodkeeper thing work, and I haven't actually played with Vine Weft yet either, so maybe it's a little better than I thought, and we can give it a shot. We want each of these. This one is actually not a turn 1 play. It's probably a turn 3 play, or maybe a turn 2 play. All of these are turn 2 plays. These are all turn 3 plays. These are all turn 4 plays, except for Living Totem, which probably is going to be a turn 3 or maybe a turn 4, so I'll put it there. And then these are 5 and 6 drops accordingly. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll have the mana on turn 5 and turn 6, but that's when we would like to see it. Vine Weft, we're never going to cast it on turn 1 because we won't have a target for it. So I'm assuming it's going to be more of a turn 4 or turn 5 play where we put it on our 3-drop or we put it on our 2-drop. So I'll put it here in the 3-drop slot. Burning Anger is a card we're not going to cast for a long time, probably not till past the time when we have our 6-drops online. It'll be the last thing that we cast. Lightning Strike is probably more a turn 5 or a turn 4 play. And Inferno Fist is the same. It's going to come down on turn 4 or turn 5 because we're going to need something to actually put it on by the time we do it. Another thing about Inferno Fist that I like is to wait until we actually have the mana to sacrifice it right away, just in case they kill our creature. If we play it with no mana available and they kill our creature, then we lose our Inferno Fist, our creature, and the ability to do 2 damage. Titanic Growth, again, I know it looks like a 2-drop because it costs 2 mana, but you never cast it on turn 2. You end up casting it over here on turn 4 or turn 5, so I'll put it here. Now what this does is, the reason why I do this is because I want to see when I actually expect to cast the cards, and then I can change my mana accordingly. For example, I look at it like this. All of our early plays are red. All of them. And then when we move over here, it's red, 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 and then green, 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 green. So this is about equal here, but it's weighted towards red here. If we move to the 4-drop or the turn 4-ish area, they're mostly red. And then here it's equal, and then here it's red again. So we know that we're heavy red now. Magic Online says actually 11-6, but I don't agree with that. I'm going to do 10-7. Okay, let's submit this deck and see what it can do. Okay, here we are for game number 1, and as you can see, I've developed my board, had a couple of creatures killed, I traded a creature off. One thing that we'll note here is that our opponent's on 4 colors of mana and has just hit their 5th as well. So yeah, kind of interesting to see a 5-color deck in M15. You don't see that every day. But this game actually ended up coming down to Broodkeeper. We're able to cast a Broodkeeper and then put not 1, but 2 Inferno Fists on it, creating 2 fire-breathing dragon tokens that we then use to ride to victory. Okay, sideboarding. So our opponent is playing a very slow, clunky deck, and I want to punish them as much as possible by being as aggressive as I can be. I don't really see a lot of cards that make me more aggressive, but I decided to bring in Reclamation Sage and take out Titanic Growth because Reclamation Sage can hit Verdant Haven. Okay, so we have a pretty solid hand, and we decide to keep it here. Our early turns, remember, don't play Forge Devil onto an empty board. It must kill itself, so we don't do that. But as you can see, as we develop our board a little bit here, we do play a Reclamation Sage on turn 3, even though there's no target for it. Sometimes it's best just to develop your board and start making creatures rather than trying to be greedy and wait for a target for the Reclamation Sage. An interesting turn pops up a few turns later where our opponent has a Sungrace Pegasus, and I think the inclination is to play Netcaster Spider so that we can block it. But it's better actually to use up all of our mana and sequence our plays so that I can play Charging Rhino this turn, take one hit from the Sungrace Pegasus, and then that sets up the following turn where I can play 2 3-drops or any other combination that I feel like. I end up deciding on Netcaster Spider plus Krenko's Enforcer, but I could have played Broodkeeper and Generator Servant as well. So after developing our board, our opponent attempts to stabilize with a Constricting Sliver on our Charging Rhino. But since we've still got Forge Devil in our hand, I decide to attack with all of our creatures, basically daring our opponent to block with Constricting Sliver so that we can use the Forge Devil on it. And there's a juicy target for my Forge Devil. We take out a Venom Sliver, which is going to clear the path for a bunch of attacks. Now their life total has fallen down to a precarious one, and even after resolving Feral Incarnation, one of the best board stabilizers in the format, we still have enough damage to just simply attack for the win. We decide to go for the Inferno Fist as well, but we didn't even need it. So we have to mulligan a hand that has no action, but we do keep our 6-card hand, which has quite a bit of action actually. Turn 2 Altac Bloodseeker, and if we get lucky and draw Mountain, we'll also have a Krenko's Enforcer. We do get lucky and draw Mountain, and now we can start getting some pretty good value from our Bloodseeker, even against a fairly well-developed board from our opponent. We attack with both creatures. Our opponent blocks with Wall of Mulch. We use Lightning Strike to kill Coral Barrier, and that's going to give the activated ability or the triggered ability from Altac Bloodseeker and allow us to eat that wall before our opponent can even draw a card off of it. Not bad at all. Now this turn is pretty good for our opponent. They play an Amphin Pathmage, which is pretty nice. We're going to unabashedly attack into it because, of course, we've got another Lightning Strike that we can use to kill, well, either creature if one of them were to block. But they can't, they don't, and we play a Hornet Nest. Now, Hornet Nest matches up pretty well against blue-green, except for that the Amphin Pathmage will eventually be able to just start attacking through it. This turn, though, is pretty crazy for our opponent. They play Invasive Species and a land after floating a mana, play a Research Assistant, but they're not done yet. There's a Living Totem as well. So all of a sudden, we're facing down this huge board state with just 2 2-powered attackers and our opponent on 14 life. And what do we draw? Well, we draw a Living Totem of our own. The first things first, though, let's attack with both of our creatures. Our opponent decides to block with Living Totem, and that clears the way for us to Lightning Strike the Amphin Pathmage and kill the Living Totem thanks to the first strike and pump from the Altac Bloodseeker. We also get in for 2 damage. Now the question is, do we want to play Living Totem or not? We have to tap our Hornet Nest, and we would really like to be able to block Invasive Species. But at 20 life, we're perfectly happy to trade some of our life total to get that Living Totem on the board so that we can get a counter on Krenko's Enforcer, which then allows us to put our opponent on a 4-turn clock. We take that clock down to 3 while we draw a land. We keep drawing lands, so we need a little bit of backup, but not really. We're 1 turn away here with our Krenko's Enforcer, and Juggernaut has arrived. Now, Juggernaut's an artifact creature and can block Krenko's Enforcer, so even though we draw an extra land, we cannot attack. But Juggernaut must attack each turn, can't be blocked by walls, can be blocked by insects. Hornet Nest is not a wall. It does have Defender, but it's an insect. Our opponent takes 1 more Desperation Loot with Research Assistant, sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the game. For sideboarding, I decide not to sideboard, but Having looked back at it, I see that I should have brought in either one or both Reclamation Sage, as we saw a Juggernaut and also a Gargoyle Sentinel that was in the graveyard. So I think that that was a mistake, and I think that in hindsight, I would have brought in both. As it stood, I decided that I wanted my deck to remain as aggressive as possible and did not bring them in. In the second game, we keep our opening 7 and start to develop our board. We use the not often played Vine Weft to our advantage to get an attack, and we trade our Altac Bloodseeker for a Shaman of Spring just to prevent any type of bounce shenanigans where we can fall behind. With no removal in hand, the Bloodseeker's not nearly as good. We get to follow up with Krenko's Enforcer and try to keep maximum pressure on our opponent, who's already down to 14 life. Our opponent has Juggernaut, and what we're going to do here is take advantage of the fact that Juggernaut must attack each turn by developing our board with Netcaster Spider and Generator Servant, and just not attacking. Remember, the Juggernaut can block the Krenko's Enforcer as well, so we don't want to do that. We could trade Goblin Rough Rider, but we'd rather just take 5 damage and then look at the backswing that we can unleash on our opponent. Our opponent plays Charging Rhino, and we have some decisions to make. The first decision after drawing the land for Miner's Bane is, do we want to attack with everything? Yeah, I think we do. We could stand to lose the Netcaster Spider or the Goblin Rough Rider and not be too sad about it. And we can lose really any of our creatures and not worry about it too much. And we're going to be getting in for over half of our opponent's life total, dropping them to 6. And we get to follow up with Miner's Bane, which is a really tough card to deal with. Plus, we're at 15 life, so we feel comfortable. Once again, we take the 5 damage from Juggernaut to enable an Alpha Strike. Now, this is a big decision point. Do we attack with everything? The answer is yes. We could sit back and block, and it wouldn't be too bad, but it's much better here to attack with everything because our opponent needs 2 different types of spells in hand to beat us. They need a defensive spell. They also need the ability to have some type of combat trick. Remember, we're at 10 life, and they have 9 power on the battlefield. As it turns out, our opponent does have the defensive end of that spectrum with Chrono Stutter to put Miner's Bane back on top, but being forced to trade with Charging Rhino with our Goblin Rough Rider means that they're in no position to recover, and we are able to attack for the win the next turn. Okay, on to the finals. We keep a decent opening 7 on the play, and on turn 4, we're faced with an interesting decision with our Generator Servant. We've got a couple of different options, as the Generator Servant isn't really doing much as an attacker, and I'd rather use it for its mana ability. We have 2 main options to choose from, and to help us make that decision, let's go in the tank. It's important to remember during the draft which cards you're passing, as much as which cards you're taking. This is something that often gets overlooked, but if you look back at this draft, we passed not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 Peel from Realities in this draft. This is the kind of thing that you make a mental note of during the draft, and if it comes up later, you keep it in your head. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. We are now facing down a blue opponent who could very easily have some number of Peel from Realities in the deck. Now, one of our goals with this hand is to get Broodkeeper on the battlefield and get Inferno Fist attached to it so that we can make the dragon. Making a dragon is a big deal with Broodkeeper, and it's really important that over the course of the game, at some point, we make that happen. Now, Miner's Bane would be a good option here as well. A 6/3 with haste on turn 4 is nothing to sneeze at. But given the fact that our opponent is completely tapped out and what we know from the draft portion, we're going to take this opportunity now to play Broodkeeper, attach Inferno Fist to it, and also get in for 4 damage after making our dragon. Our opponent attacks us for a couple of damage with Aeronaut Tinkerer, plays an Ornithopter, and passes the turn back. We draw our 5th land, and the obvious play is just to play Burning Anger on our Broodkeeper, get another dragon, start doing tons of... Oh, yeah, right. Okay, so let's remember, we passed 4 Peel from Realities this draft, and it is reckless to just run a Burning Anger out there onto our Broodkeeper. No, instead what we're going to do is we're going to attack with Broodkeeper and Dragon and see what happens. So now our opponent blocks with Ornithopter and, aha, a Peel from Reality appears. So we feel very smart now, having played around Peel from Reality quite nicely. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do for our dragon friend, as he's going to get bounced into the ether. So now, post-combat, we've got another decision to make. Again, this is easy, right? We just put Burning Anger onto our Brood... right. Peel from Reality, it's still a possibility. With 4 of them having been passed in the draft, it's still worth it to play around it here and not take the risk of playing the Burning Anger. So instead, we're just going to play Shaman of Spring and pass a turn. Our opponent plays an additional Aeronaut Tinkerer in addition to an Ornithopter and attacks us for 2 before passing the turn with, once again, the ominous blue and a colorless mana sitting there. So it's again decision time. Burning Anger on it? No, of course not. Let's instead evaluate the board and see where we want to go from here. Attack with Broodkeeper seems to be the best attack that we have, and it looks like we're just going to get chump blocked for this turn. And again, we're not going to play Burning Anger into Peel from Reality this game. It's not worth the risk. Now our opponent plays their 6th land and attacks with both Aeronaut Tinkerers. Now this is a concerning attack as it drops us to 12, but we're the ones with 6 power, maybe even 8 with the Inferno Fist sitting on the battlefield, and it's not often you'll see somebody trade 6 damage for 4 damage, so we're a little suspicious here. We draw our card for the turn. It's another Forest. Is this the turn where we can finally play that Burning Anger on? No, still not. There's 4 Peel from Realities and 1 of them shown from our opponent. We're just going to attack, and there it is. Another Peel from Reality, so we avert disaster once again. I've got an interesting decision here now, as if I want to get value from my Inferno Fist, I cannot play Miner's Bane as well. So it's going to be one or the other for me, and I decide to go ahead and get some value from the Inferno Fist here. This allows me to just simply replay the Broodkeeper post-combat and keep a nice board state going. Unfortunately for me, my opponent has Statute of Denial and counters a Broodkeeper, but I can live with that. On this turn, our opponent plays Divination, plays an Island, plays a Fugitive Wizard, and plays a Staff of the Mind Magus, leaving them with 1 card in hand. Now, we know that card is an Aeronaut Tinkerer. We attack with Shaman of Spring, which elicits a chump block, and follow up with a Miner's Bane. Our opponent draws Divination, plays it, gains a life, and then plays Ensoul Artifact on Darksteel Citadel. Now this is a big problem. We're at 10 life. Our opponent's at 14, and they're going to kill us in 2 turns with that pesky Darksteel Citadel if we don't do anything. Blocking's out of the question though here. We're going to take 5. Okay, this next decision is a pretty tough one. It's very, very complex. There's a lot of different options for me here. What I decide to do, though, is Lightning Strike the Aeronaut Tinkerer and then attack with just the Miner's Bane, leaving back Shaman of Spring. This allows me to pump the Miner's Bane for an additional damage, knocking my opponent down to 7. Remember, the 1 card left in hand is Aeronaut Tinkerer. But, again, we have to respect Peel from Reality. Maybe one of them comes off the top. If I attack with both of my creatures and only play the Forge Devil, my opponent draws Peel from Reality, plays the Tinkerer, and peels from Reality both the Tinkerer and my blocker, thus leaving me dead on board. So instead, I'm trying to figure out how I can kill my opponent in 2 turns. And the way that I do it, attack with Miner's Bane, pump the Miner's Bane, and then play Forge Devil. Sure, I have to take a damage, but it gives me an additional blocker that I can use in case my opponent draws, say, a Peel from Reality, or a Frost Lynx, or a Chrono Stutter. My opponent plays Aeronaut Tinkerer and Fugitive Wizard, the drawn card for the turn, and now, can I finally play this Burning Anger? Yeah, I can! I finally can. I play Burning Anger on my Miner's Bane and set up a pretty sweet play to finish this game. I even get to play Titanic Growth on it here to bring it up to the full 10 power, and just boom, 10 to your face, and that ends game 1. For sideboarding, I bring in both Reclamation Sages, as we've seen some pretty good artifact targets, and I take out both Vine Weft and Titanic Growth, as they're not very good against bounce spells. In game 2, we have a really nice opener. Our opponent opens things, though, on an Ornithopter, puts an Ensoul Artifact on it, and kills us with it. We didn't change anything out of the sideboard and got off to a pretty quick start this game. Our attack was temporarily stifled by a Juggernaut, which is actually a pretty good blocker the turn it comes down, but we were able to work the must attack clause into our favor so that we could win the race against ultimately not that powerful cards like Fugitive Wizard and Staff of the Mind Magus. So, we ended up winning the draft. Thank you for joining me in yet another draft here on DailyMTG.com. One thing to remember before we go, pay attention to what you're passing in the draft just as much as what you take, and it'll pay off down the line. We'll see you guys next time.